Hi, I'm Ken Howard, and welcome to the Gay Therapy LA podcast. Today, I'd like to talk about gay men coping with stress. Start at the source. At the time of this writing, which is June 2020, we as a country in the United States and all of us in the world are experiencing unprecedented times, and not in a good way. Since into the first quarter of 2020, some would say even before, our world has had to deal with the impact of COVID-19 and its implications for work, social lives, and personal operations, and most of us continue to live under various levels of lockdown or quarantine conditions with only tentative and kind of risky relief in various locales, with a general feeling that the powers that be are conflicted between the health and safety of the people versus an economic, oligarchic machine that must be fed by labor for the consumerism of the world. While some countries have had the solace of sound leadership, the United States has not, except for some progressive state governors, but even they are under pressure to balance human lives with profit margins. So the conditions living under this rogue and selfish and immature, incompetent president, aka Trump, are like a child who's left alone with no parents in the house. Their result is increased anxiety not only for the disease, but also for the lack of leadership and resultant chaos, lately manifested in the national and global protests after the murders of Ahmaud Arbery. My previous episode was on why white gay men should be supporting Black Lives Matter. And, of course, the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis, killed by a rogue police officer, emboldened by his support of the fascist and racist Trump. The fact that this is happening in the month of June is poignant in that it was in June of 1969 that the abuses of police brutality spurred the Stonewall riots and the modern gay rights movement. The daily news about any of this has had an impact on everyone in general, and minorities, Black Americans and LGBT+, especially in particular. One of the greatest sentiments I hear from my online clients as a gay men's specialist, therapist, and life, career, and relationship coach, and sex therapist, being a therapist for 28 years, is that my guys, I call my clients my guys, are feeling overwhelmed. So let's talk about that today. How do we cope with overwhelm? The first step to solving, or at least mitigating, any problem is to identify it. Like diseases, we have to assess and diagnose before we can develop a treatment plan and expect good outcomes, which is true in medicine as well as in mental health. When I hear feeling of overwhelm from clients, I first recognize and validate their feelings. Of course they're overwhelmed. I am too, frankly. Therapists are not immune from having to face some of the same stressors that their clients are facing. The second step is to recognize that overwhelm is the cumulative force of a combination of stressors, which can be common, the global COVID-19 pandemic, or individual, such as personal financial stress, job loss, income reduction, non-COVID medical issues, or even problems that would exist for us as individuals, even if COVID-19 were not in the picture this year. The same problems and challenges don't disappear just because there is also a global crisis. I'm working with all my clients on this, where they have stuff that maybe we've been working on before the crisis started, and yet now the crisis adds another layer. To cope with overwhelm and begin to reduce it, understand that overwhelm comes from more and more individual stressors creating a snowball effect. And to reduce them, we have to take the stressors and reduce them the way they came, individually. Make a list of things that you're stressed, concerned, or worried about. Online, on your phone, on scratch paper, whatever. This can really help to get the jumble out of your head and onto a clear list. Next, with your list of stressors, identify when they started. Are they chronic, like a long-term health condition? Or are they recent, such as a COVID-related job layoff? What is the fuel that keeps those stressors going day after day? A chronic illness might not be curable, but requires ongoing treatment to reduce symptoms or preserve life, such as with HIV. Another stressor might be fueled by an ongoing toxic relationship, such as having a bad boss or being in an unhappy marriage or relationship. Which stressors are chronic versus which ones are stressful but acute and likely to have a short duration if we get the right help, such as a home repair or a car repair? That distinction is important to make. Next, identify each stressor's relative impact on your life. Losing your job and having no income might have a bigger impact on your life than needing to deal with an important but annoying home repair. You might need to have an urgent response, such as applying for government unemployment benefits or identifying an alternative opportunity to get work income. Other stressors require a less urgent response, such as having sex therapy for a sexual dysfunction, which is important, but it's not urgent. By reviewing your list of stressors, see if you can identify a theme to what's going on. Common themes that I hear or even experience myself or observe in my practice with clients includes, number one, abuses of power. We certainly saw that with the Ahmaud Arbery and the George Floyd murders. That was abuse of power from police forces that aren't properly policed. Who's policing the police? Or an abuse of power might be in a situation like sexual harassment or somebody who's in some kind of position administratively or legally or even physically or emotionally where they're coming from a place of power or privilege. They're your boss or they're your elected leader, and then they abuse the power that they've somehow been infused with. Maybe not by you, but somehow they got power. So abuse of power can be a theme. Lack of resources can be a theme. Not having enough money, not having enough time, not having enough physical energy, not having enough know-how. All of those things can be a lack of resources. Maybe there's a theme of a sense of helplessness where you need help but you don't know where it's going to come from or how to get done what you want to get done. Number 4, is there a theme of interpersonal conflict with selfish people? The Karen movement, Karen's gone wild, I see on Instagram. We see these, they're kind of funny videos, but they're also kind of sad about selfish people really acting out in a socially violent way, acting out their insecurities or acting out their privilege or acting out their entitled narcissistic attitudes that put other people down in order to raise them up. We see a lot of that, especially in LA. Is there a theme of fighting Mother Nature? You're dealing with a natural disaster at the same time that you're dealing with a chronic illness. That's Mother Nature stuff. Or number 6 is a theme being victimized by circumstance. Some kind of government policy in an oppressive government, some kind of a bureaucracy that you're trying to fight at City Hall or the state level or federal government level. Is there some kind of, or in the legal system, is there some kind of a thing you're getting bogged down with because you're involved in litigation? That's being victimized by this circumstance of bureaucracy. Now let's talk about internal resources. Reducing overwhelm and starting to fight back to reclaim a sense of peace and relative normalcy, which is, never 100% stress-free, remember. But that means identifying what internal resources you have to work with. Internal resources are those parts of ourselves that we can call on when the going gets tough. Examples are, 1, a sense of determination. I am determined to address this problem. Number 2 is affect regulation. That's a fancy word that therapists use for getting a grip on yourself. It's the ability to calm our own nerves and think with a clear head and not let the heat of passion of emotions rule us. Cooler heads rule the day, and we have to regulate when we get upset. We want to validate that maybe something is upsetting, but we also want to regulate what our response is. As Jack Canfield, one of my favorite authors, says, event plus response equals outcome. If you have a response that's hysterical and chaotic, you're not going to get a good outcome. But if a chaotic event happens and you respond rationally and from a place of strength, your outcome is going to be very different. Number 3, it could be confidence, challenging any negative self-talk or negative messages that we have internalized from abusive, critical, selfish, or bigoted sources. Number 4 is our values. Those would be an internal resource, sticking up for what we believe in that form the core of who we are as individuals and as humans, and what is important to each of us in our own way, which may be different from others. Not everybody has to have the same values. Number 5 is self-talk, what we tell ourselves about ourselves, which can help us if it's positive and affirming, or it can hurt us if it's negative and undermining. If we're internalizing what other critical people have said and we've tried to take it as fact of how we feel about ourselves. Just because somebody says something critical about you doesn't necessarily mean that it's so. You want to consider the source and whether or not you respect that source. Now let's look at your external resources. Once we are armed with our internal resources, we seek out external resources. And these can be government programs that offer income replacement, having a consultation from an expert attorney, having guidance from an admired or mentoring boss figure, getting support from family, especially the occasional wisdom of older parents, but certainly from siblings who come from our own generation, having the love and support of a spouse or partner, gaining access to a professional or expert, such as a therapist or coach. That's an external resource. Searching out a website that has answers to our sometimes very specific questions. I had that recently. I needed to change the fuse on my car, and I had to look up diagrams online, get a kit that is about car fuses at a car supply store, and then read on how to replace the fuse. I did it all myself without having to take it into a shop, all because I could look up on a website about what my kind and year and make of car had for its fuses. There's a website for everything. Or reading some kind of book or article, or either something free or something that we buy. This podcast is an external resource. It's a free source of not therapy, but guidance that is available to anyone who wants to listen. So let's talk about problem-solving therapy. Now, problem-solving therapy is one technique of the many that I use with clients. You've probably heard me say cognitive behavioral therapy. You've probably heard me say LGBT affirmative therapy, kink affirmative therapy, psychodynamic therapy. There's a lot of different schools of thought that a therapist can be trained in, and many different methodologies of coaching that a coach can be trained in as well. But one of these is a classic one called problem-solving therapy, or PST. And this is especially helpful for reducing overwhelm and coping with multiple stressors, because PST involves a number of sequential steps. So I'll share them with you. There are 7. Number 1 is identify the problem. What's going on? Number 2 is brainstorm possible solutions and go wild with this. Let your imagination fly. There are no wrong answers with this. Number 3, evaluate your options. Some brainstormed ideas are going to be more plausible, affordable, convenient, existent, manageable, etc. than others. Number 4 is implement your choice of intervention, taking the actual action after careful consideration and evaluation of your options. Number 5 is evaluate the impact of your intervention. What worked, what didn't, what could be adjusted for greater effectiveness for solving that problem. Number 6 is maintain or revise as conditions change. And number 7 is you repeat the process as necessary if a problem recurs, the same one, or if new problems arise. And then you go through the 7 steps of PST all over again. Let's talk for a second about PST, problem-solving therapy for gay men. The gay men in particular, PST is a little different because our internal and external resources are culturally specific. We have the ones that other people have, but we also have some special ones by being in a subculture of the general population, by being in the LGBT plus community. So the LGBT plus community in general, and gay men in particular, have a long history of striving for equal rights under the law, a struggle that continues against the Republicans and the anti-gay religious conservatives worldwide. But we want to use our special internal and external resources, such as community strengths and the resources created by working together to help each other in the community, to fight those who would oppress us. And there are many who would oppress us, and be proud of it in its mean-spirited, hateful intention. There are sadistic people in the world. We have to accept that. But our unique LGBT plus challenges also evoke unique strengths and creative responses in the community, and that's what helps us from being vanquished. It's the spirit of Stonewall that we keep revisiting every June to keep the striving for equal rights to life and dignity alive. Doing the work of PST is systematic and it can be time-consuming. But if you apply your unique internal resources that make you you, and your external resources that you're able to identify through your brainstorming, through your research, through your networking skills, you will probably find that eventually each stressor can be taken off your list and unloaded one at a time, maybe two at a time, and you feel less stressed and less overwhelmed. And that's something we could all use these days, right? So while COVID-19 will someday, not soon enough, but eventually subside, we will continue to have both individual and collective or social problems. We need to continually apply active, adaptive coping throughout our lifespan to deal with the curveballs that life throws us. Having a commitment to lifelong self-care and the continuous pursuit of self-improvement will help us age with refined coping skills and ever-increasing wisdom, which is one of the good parts about getting older. Our interpersonal relationships, being active in social and political reform, like we've seen in June 2020 with the protests, and adapting to a changing world with all of its overwhelming technology are also considerations. Maybe we'll discuss those in another episode. But for now, recognize that your overwhelm can diminish. It's important to start from a place of hope and confidence to get started. And remember that with all of this that's going on now, this too shall pass. Happy Pride Month. For more information about who I am and what I do, Ken Howard, LCSW, founder and executive director of Gay Therapy LA, and my associates, visit gaytherapyla.com or call me, text me if you're interested in therapy if you're in California, or coaching services if you're outside of California or outside of the United States. And one of us would be happy to help. And that number is in the United States, area code 310-339-5778. So 310-339-5778. Or email me, ken@gaytherapyla.com. And remember, for the whole library of either podcasts, visit other episodes on this podcast, Gay Therapy LA with Ken Howard, LCSW, or visit gaytherapyla.com/blog, and you can search in the search box on just about any topic, and there should be a blog article that corresponds to just about every problem gay men have, even though more are being developed all the time, right? So hang in there. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.